Time to install the servos. Okay, the first step that I perform before installing my servos, of course you want to make sure they're functional. I use this little servo tester and I connect a battery and I just use the ESC to power it, but I test the servo by putting it in automatic and letting it actuate the servo back and forth. Make sure that there's no binding, make sure it performs the way it's supposed to. And then I find the neutral position on the servo. It has a neutral setting on the servo tester. And then I'll put my control horn on and my control horn screw to secure it to the servo in the neutral position and the orientation in which I'm going to install the servo, which is going to be in this orientation. I'm going to bring the wires in behind the fuselage, because I typically like to have everything installed behind my battery, because if you ever nose it in, chances are that battery is going to come out and it's going to take with it anything that's in front of it. So I typically mount all my electronics behind where I'm going to put my battery. So the other thing that you want to do with your servos, because we're going to be gluing these in and they fit nice and snug inside these slots. And like I said, the slot cutouts on the main wing plate were made specifically for these Hextronic HXT 500. They're 5-gram nylon servos. I've had very good luck with these servos. Never had a problem with them. But take your utility knife, your X-Acto knife, before installing your servos. What we're going to do is we're put a little bit of glue underneath each one of the tabs when we seat this into the main wing plate. So what I do is I just take the X-Acto knife and I just score that plastic. I kind of make a waffle pattern on it underneath each one of the tabs that will give the glue a little better hold on the plastic by doing that. And then I do the same thing on the labels. I just score the labels in a waffle pattern in that little 5mm area where it's going to be sitting inside the foam. Both sides, and also the area underneath these tabs, I just put a little waffle pattern on there. Now we just feed our wires through, and I usually start these at a bit of an angle and make sure that you have support underneath your wing plate, because it's going to take a little bit of pressure to seat this servo in place and make a dry fit before you apply glue to it. But just rock that back a little bit. And there we go. It seats in there nice and snug into that wing plate. But you need to support, and that's why you need to support it underneath. You do not want to damage your main wing plate putting in your servos. So if it's a little too snug for your liking on putting these servos in, then just widen your gap a little bit. The glue's going to hold it in place. So not the friction on the wing plate. That's just going to help a little bit. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my foam tack and I'm going to put just a little bit of glue underneath these two tabs. Not a whole lot, because I don't want to make a mess on top of the wing plate. Underneath each one of them. That's plenty. Okay, so we've got glue underneath our tabs on our servo. We're just going to feed our wire through. We're going to do the same thing that we did with our dry fit. We're going to get the wire in first. Rock that down a little bit. Support the wing plate directly, on either side of that servo. And then just push it in place. Nice and firm. Take your little scrap foam and clean up any glue that has, squirted out underneath the tab. There we go. So our servo was seated in there. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to flip it over. And I'm just going to put a little bit of glue on each side of that servo. I guess I should turn it around here so you can actually see it. I'm going to put just a little bead of glue all the way around it. Make sure we've got it in there nice and secure. Right on top of that tab. Don't glue down your wire. Okay. Alright, so now I'm going to just clean up this glue just a little bit. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to let this servo set up a little bit, and then when we come back, we're going to remove the wires from our little shroud here. We're going to punch a hole in the landing skid and then punch a hole in the bottom of the fuselage to bring our wires in inside the fuselage, and then just put a little piece of tape down across the bottom of the wing plate to hold that in. And the reason that I don't have that in the plans is because, you know, it depends on what kind of servo you're going to use, where you're going to locate your receiver. You may need to flip those servos over and bring the wires in on the front side rather than on the back side. You know, it depends on the length of cable that's on the servos and how you're going to orient it, where you're going to put your receiver, because of course you got to plug them into your receiver. So what I do is just install the servos and then decide exactly how I want to bring those in. We're just going to use a barbecue skewer to punch a little hole to bring those servo cables inside and connect them. Alright, so as soon as that sets up, we'll be back. Okay, back to our servo installation. I've given this glue a little bit of time to set up. And as you can see, I already have one of my servo cables pulled through into the fuselage. And it's going to be in a location very close to where my receiver is going to be. And I have my barbecue skewer. So what we're going to do, I'm going to flip the plane over, and let me show you the first one. So what I did was I just used the barbecue skewer to drill a little hole right next to the wing plate into the landing skid, out the other side, and then just continued to push it through to create a hole inside the fuselage, and then I just threaded the wires through. So what I did was I took the shroud, the servo cable shroud, off of the pins, because I want to create this hole as small as I can and thread these servo cables through. So let's try and get this about in the same location that we got the first one. And you probably want to hang on to the back side of the skid plate, landing skid, so that you're not pushing your, if you have a decal on it, you're not pushing your decal away from the landing skid. So I'm going to come in right here, really close to the bottom of the wing plate. Let's see, I want to get it as close to the other one as possible so that it looks symmetrical anyway. Okay, so I think that's good. And we're just going to push it through. Watch your fingers on the other side. Okay, so we got that through, and then we're just going to move this back and forth a little bit to open up that hole a little bit. And then we're going to go straight through the fuselage. And I'm going to puncture it right across from the hole on the other side. Okay. And this one's a little easier to push through because it doesn't have a decal on it. We've just got foam and paper to go through. Okay. So we are through now. Let's go ahead and pull that out, and then I'm just going to go back inside this hole in the fuselage again, and I'm just going to move it around a little bit to open that hole up large enough that I can thread those through. So those are pretty clean holes that we're going to push this through. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab two of my cables at one time, and I'm going to thread them through. And it's a tedious job, I will admit, It's not a lot of fun, but it is necessary. Unless you want to open up a much bigger hole, which I don't. So, let's get the first one threaded through. And then we'll grab the second one and we will thread it through. So I've got 2 of them in. And then we'll grab the third one. It's easier to do it one at a time, because the wires, of course, are much thinner than the metal. And just pull the slack up in all of them. And as you can see, hopefully you can see on the other side. And then I'm just going to pull this through. And we want to make sure that when we bring it across the wing plate, you can see where I've got just a little piece of tape here. So if you've got any twist in your cable, you want to untwist your cable and keep it as flat as possible. And then I just put a little piece of packing tape across there so that this servo cable is not catching any wind on the bottom of the plate, and it'll hold it in place, and hopefully it won't get snagged on anything. So now we're going to do the same thing with the fuselage. And I'll bring this down so hopefully you can see it. I'm going to push one through, and then we're going to try and push. Well, we might be able to put all of them through here. Let's see. Since I widened that hole. Yeah. Feels like it anyway. Okay. So let's look at it. On the inside of the fuselage, I've got all 3 of them coming through. I'm going to pull that through, and I want to take any twist that I have out of my cable. As you can see, I've got 1 twist in it. And just push the slack inside the fuselage. Okay, so I've got my wires. All I have to do is put my shroud back on, and then put a little piece of tape over the servo cable, and they're close to symmetrical. That's not going to look too bad. So now we have our servos installed. We have our servo cables inside our fuselage ready to be connected to our receiver. So go ahead and finish that up. I'm going to finish mine up, and then it will be time for the next step. We're almost completed with this assembly.